We've been talking about wisdom in this class. We've been talking about how to handle anger. I wanted to wrap that up and move into another subject today, and then next week will be my last class. So in our study of wisdom, we've been examining how to manage anger and not let anger be disordered love. Anger must be examined from the perspective of what we're defending. We talked about that. Is what we are angry about worth defending? Is it really worth making us that angry? Is it worth defending? Because is it from God's perspective or just our own selfish perspective? Timothy Keller tells an interesting story. His wife says she believes that marriage without children is like being on a long date. She says real change doesn't happen in your life when you get married. Change happens when you have children. She says your life doesn't really go into the toilet until you have children. Even if you are a mediocre parent, it's sacrifice, 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 and you don't do 3/4 of the things you used to do that you really like doing. I just had a conversation with someone this week about how they felt that now that they have children, it's like they never get to do anything really that they want to do. Maybe it's not ever, but it's always prioritizing the children's needs and not theirs. And they didn't like it. Everything revolves around the kids, or the kids, you make all the sacrifices, and at some point the kid becomes a teenager, and now you cross the kid's will as a teenager and you ask them not to do something that everyone else in the whole world knows is self-destructive and stupid, and your child turns to you and says, "You don't love me, you hate me, and I hate you. You ruined my life. I hate you, I hate you. You've never done anything for me." And when that happens, there's nothing more painful. Even if you have been a bad parent, you still sacrifice because you really have no choice. And to have someone you have done more for and sacrificed more for than anyone, even your spouse, to look you in the eye and say, "You've done nothing for me and you have ruined my life," is the most hurtful thing you can hear. And when they say, "I hate you," it goes right to your heart. Why? Because it's the most unjustified, disproportionate, disordered rage possible. Because it hurts so deeply, there's a huge test at this point for the parent. There are only 3 things you can do, really. 1, you can withdraw, walk away, just stay away from them. Because it hurts so much, you give them up to their self-destructive impulses, and now you've lost your kid. Or 2, you can rage back, say harsh words, show them how ungrateful they are, and fight it out. Because you have 30 years of practice of yelling, you'll probably win. "I hate you." "Well, I hate you too, you ungrateful." This is another way to keep them from, there is another way to keep from the pain, but in that case, you've still lost your kid. And 3, the hardest thing to do, and the only way to save your child, is to do a surgical strike. Strike the problem, not the child or the person. Come in close and insist on the truth firmly and gently. This is the way it is. This is my decision, and absorb their anger without paying it back. I know you're angry, but this is how it's going to be. If you absorb the pain without paying back, you can save your child and your relationship. You can be angry with the idiot in your kid, but don't display anger towards the kid. To do this, we must realize what God has done. We're angry with God. We don't want to admit we're angry with God because people don't want to admit they're angry. We want this and that and this and that, and God hasn't given it to us, so we become angry. The proof that we are angry with God is that it is the most unjustified, disordered, hurtful rage is because when God became human, we killed him. We mocked him. We tortured him. And what did he do? He did not withdraw. He did not strike back. He went to the cross. And on the cross, he told us the truth and absorbed our disordered rage without paying us back. He also took the anger we deserved without paying us back. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. This is the ultimate surgical strike. He loved the sinner and hated the sin. He forgave our sins so he could embrace the sinner. If we truly understand how God forgave us who wronged him, then we have a better chance of forgiving those who wrong us. God responded with cosmic gentleness, and we live in a world of culture and anger. Is it practical to respond with gentleness? And I know here we could perhaps pass the mic around and respond, but I know Bobby was talking to me earlier. Could you give the mic to Bob? He was talking to me earlier and he was sharing some things that I just thought was amazing, and maybe he could share it with us.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I have an anger issue. I've had it for a long time, and I pray about it, and I pray about it, and I pray about it. And every day when God tests me, I fail. And so last week, I came to Norm's class. Don't ask me why. I was just killing time, and I walk in here, and here we are talking about anger. And I just went, wow, God's talking to me. So that night, went home, went to bed, and got up at 2:30 in the morning to go to the bathroom. And I go, all right, I have a habit of getting on Facebook on my phone just to see who's out there to make me mad that early in the morning. And so I get on there, and here's my mom had put a story in there about the guy that wrote the song, It Is Well With My Soul. And I went, wow, and I read that story. And here this guy lost his 4-year-old son. The next year, he sent his family on a cruise or a trip, and the boat capsized, and he lost all 4 of his daughters. His wife was spared. The next year, his business burnt down, and the insurance company would not pay for it because it was an act of God. And here this guy has lost everything in his life. Now he lost his job, and here I'm mad because somebody pulls out in front of me and don't use their directional light, and 10 minutes later I'll do the same thing. I get mad over politics. I get mad because it's raining. I get mad about everything. And this song, the guy that wrote this really got me thinking. And if there's anybody in here that thinks that God don't talk to you, think again. So today I'm sitting in church. Now he ain't done with me yet. I'm sitting right back there in the corner. And in that basket, there's coloring books for the kids and Keys for the Kids, little booklet back there. So Bob can't read, so he thought it was an adult book. So I opened it up. And right to the first page I opened, good anger. That's the story. So God's working with me. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. Oh, wow.
Oh, and I have gone a whole week without getting mad about anything.
Good for you.
So when I feel myself getting angry, I just start singing It Is Well. And it's working.
Good for you, Bob. Good for you. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on this. I'll keep going. Because we're going to enter into a new area now. Proverbs 23, 17, 18, Psalm 73, 1 through 3, 2026. Do not let your heart envy sinners, but always be zealous for the fear of the Lord. There is surely a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. Surely God is good to those pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped, and I nearly lost my foothold. For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. As a dream when one awakes, so when you arise, O Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you, yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand and guide me with your counsel. And afterward, you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. This is wisdom. The book of Proverbs, and wisdom specifically, is the ability to direct the deep currents of our heart. And envy is one of the most powerful currents of our heart that must be channeled and directed. I was talking to somebody this morning about envy. They said they were envious of someone else. And Probably wasn't in the context that I'm using it here, but before we continue, we need to establish what we're going to discuss. Envy is a common term and one we're all familiar with. So help me define what envy is. What is it? What does it look like? What do people most often envy, and why do you think people envy? What do you think? Give me some feedback here so I kind of have a pre-test before we go into the rest of this as to what you're thinking.
Money.
Okay, people envy people with money. Someone else, maybe tackle over here. Jeannie has her hand up. Maybe tackle the definition of envy from your point of view. That would be helpful.
Well, I was going to start out by saying that, yes, I think most often people envy things that others that you don't have, something that they have that you don't have. But often I envy a person's, I'm not even going to say it, their demeanor or their personality. There's something about a person that I just think, oh gosh, I wish I could be more like that, whether it's a calmness in a turbulent time or just how they handle things.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll take a stab at a definition. I think envy is wanting something that you see in someone else that you don't have.
Good. Good. Anyone else? In verse 3 of Psalm 73, we see, I envied the arrogant. David was not envying their arrogance, but rather he was envying their prosperity. After verse 3, it mentions what some of those things are that he envies. Their bodies are healthy and sleek. They had great-looking bodies. They increased in wealth. They had a lot of money. And they were not plagued by the ills of common humanity. So they live a charmed life, sort of. So envy is basically wanting, kind of what Becky and Lindsay were saying. Envy is Jeannie, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm thinking Lindsay. So envy is basically wanting someone else's life. You see that they have something better than you, and instead of rejoicing for them, you weep over the fact you do not have it. However, envy goes beyond that because we don't just want someone else's life, but we resent their lives. We begrudge them their lives. And I don't think this is what Jeannie was talking about, but this is a lot of what people go through. In praise, we rejoice when others have something better than us, acknowledging we could never accomplish that. But in envy, you recognize people who have it better than you, and you resent it.
Yeah.
You're angry about it. You hate it. Envy is being unhappy with other people's happiness. When those who have it better than you fall down, you like it. Given this definition, why should we deal with it? Why is it so serious? What impact does it have on us? Why does it have an impact? You wouldn't have tabloid magazines if that weren't
That's
for
where I
this
was going to
issue.
go, that envy has a feeling. It's not just cerebral. And I suppose there's mild envies, but then there are the deep-seated ones where you literally don't like the person and you're angry.
Yeah,
I think it can be that deep-seated.
yeah.
And you gloat over their misfortune or whatever.
Anyone else? Dangerous having him handle the mic. That's okay. He has good thoughts. He has good thoughts. By the way, that's Jeannie, not Lindsay, just so you know.
Jeannie Lindsley. So I'm just wondering, is there a word then for when you're, I don't want to say envious, when you admire things that people have or their personalities or something that they have in them, but you don't begrudge them?
Praise.
It's a different terminology that I would use praise for.
Well, there's a comment over here, but we'll just take it. I'll just repeat what he said, Larry. Mark said
Two of
admiration.
these people.
Yeah, admiration.
Huh?
Admiration, he said, which I think that's a good word. It doesn't cause you to begrudge them, and you're not really praising them. You're just admiring them. It's very, very good.
So is there a difference
You have to keep using the mic because this is recorded and taped so people listen to it. And we have to know what you're saying.
Is there a difference between envy and jealousy?
Anyone want to address that? I would say that they are extremely close. One encapsulates the other. I think jealousy is a subset of envy. I talked a lot in this class about blind spots. Those areas in our life we cannot see and are causing us to walk into traps that harm us in our relationships with God and in our relationships with others. Envy can be one of those blind spots. Envy must be dealt with in our life because it hides itself more than almost any other sin. You don't want to believe you have envy. Most of us could still sleep without much problem if accused of pride, anger, lust, or even greed. What are the 7 deadly sins that are talked about? What are they? We've got a lot of them up there. Pride, anger, lust, greed, sloth, gluttony, and what's the 7th one? I don't know. No one knows? Well, we got all but one. Becky's looking it up. Mark usually does. He's resting. You got it?
Wrath.
Well, that's the same as anger.
Yeah. What is the 7th?
She said the 7th is wrath.
Well, okay. But if we have anger, it would probably be the same thing as wrath.
Yeah.
So let's keep going. Becky, did you find it? Not yet. We have it over here. Hand them the mic over here, Larry. And we'll at least cover them.
Okay, envy, gluttony, greed, lust, pride, sloth, and wrath.
Which one didn't we have? Greed's up there. Pride, anger, greed. But anger, it's not anger and wrath. It's just wrath.
Envy, gluttony, greed, lust, pride, sloth, and wrath.
Sloth is the one I think I missed. If you make sure, if you use anger and wrath as synonyms. Anyway, all the other sins, these 7 deadly sins, also have the disapproval of religion, but none so thoroughly and deeply diminishes and disqualifies a person as envy. The stigma of envy is its enormous pettiness. To be accused of envy is to be accused of being small and petty. Most people find it extremely humiliating to admit they're envious. And because it is so humiliating, we don't want to admit it's true. In Psalm 73:1, the psalmist is looking back at his envy and he's coming to grips with it. And he says, "My heart was grieved." And that is how envy postures itself. We say, it's not fair. It's not fair. Why do these people have this and this? I don't have it. It's not fair. We say we're not envious. We're just grieved over the injustice of it. Life isn't fair. I should have what they have. And what this psalmist is saying is he was not just sad, but he was bitter. He did not just want other people's lives, he resented them for it. He begrudged their lives to them. And eventually, he came to realize what he did not want to realize. Envy hides itself because it's so humiliating. What he's implying is we should look at some of the stress fractures in our life and evaluate if the problem is envy. For example, do you know a person in your life, at work or church or somewhere else, that you just find so irritating? You're critical of them. You may not even say it out loud, but you just find fault with them all the time. They just get under your skin. Could it be envy? It's a question worth examining. Some of us are filled with self-pity. We're unhappy with the way our lives are going. We're always feeling sorry for ourselves. We seem to be sour about everything. Could that not be ongoing envy? We're envying the lives of almost everyone we know, and as a result, it just sours our entire life. So here's a test worth taking. When you see a really bad person, a person who's powerful and rich, and suddenly they fall, how do you feel about them? Well, it's natural to feel a little bit like serves them right. But there's even a more revealing test. When you see people you like, who have a good reputation, who have a positive influence and have done well, people you like, when they really mess up, do you find it comforting? Kind of glad they did? Actually like to hear about it? That's envy. Envy rejoices when people weep. So the bottom line, to be wise, we need to deal with envy because it hides. We also need to deal with envy because it sucks the joy out of your life. Of all the things you can do, envy is the one thing that can most suck the joy out of your life. The whole idea of envy is that you see other people around you who have it better than you do, and you hate it. So let me ask you this question. You've been hearing now some of my thoughts on this. How or why would envy suck the joy out of your life? What would that look like? Why would that be?
I've always said it takes a lot of energy to be angry. And you just run out of gas.
Anyone else?
I think it's the same what Larry said. You're wasting your time thinking of comparing yourself or what they have instead of enjoying life and going forward and doing something productive. You're wasting your energy.
I think it causes you to miss what you are blessed with in your life and not appreciate the blessings that you have because you've already sort of decided that they're not adequate. Someone else has it better, and I'm going to focus on what I don't have instead of the blessings that I have.
Yeah, good, great.
Negative thinking.
Anyone else? Giving into sloth, as we talked about, that's one I missed, and laziness, which is a synonym, is rather pleasant. Giving into your tempers, not without small delights, kind of enjoy once in a while, exploding. Get it off our chest. Lust, greed, and pride, and the other 7 deadly sins all bring pleasure to the senses. Only envy is absolutely no fun at all. Envy drains all the joy from the very first moment you have it. We have all felt envies, and it stabs and cuts. If we examine the holes in our soul from stabs, it is likely envy that's doing the stabbing. Why do you think that is? Or why would I even say that? What are the holes in your soul? And from envy's stabs. Anybody have a thought on that? Are you familiar with the soul? Maybe we should talk about that. In Scripture, the soul is who you are. It encompasses your mind, body, and spirit. And envy stabs it. It stabs your very personality. It stabs your very spiritual life. It stabs your mind. Why is that? Because envy poisons the ability to enjoy the life you have. That's exactly what Mark just said. Envy poisons your ability to be grateful and enjoy what you have. He must have been reading ahead. So here, envy has been called Comparisonitis. That's misspelled, the first one. The second one I got right. Why would it be called comparisonitis?
The one word I kept thinking of that falls into this exactly is inadequate. You know, just it's a reminder that you perceive yourself or your situation to be inadequate, and that's yourself, you know, just a lie. You're telling yourself a lie.
So, Sam, how do we reconcile pride with feeling inadequate? Isn't inadequate humble?
No, I don't think so. I mean, inadequacy is just the whole idea of telling yourself you cannot, or you're unable to, or you're all the negatives of, you know, that we're not designed to see. You know, we should be looking at these things and saying where you can contribute, where you can fit in, where you can do these things, rather than the negative side. And envy just plays to that.
Great. Yeah. Well responded to. Hope you don't mind me putting you right in the middle of the bullseye there, but it's a great response. There is nothing wrong with comparison. But here is how you know if it has its roots in envy. Nothing is good enough. That is when envy has you in its grips. Your job is not good enough. Your body is not good enough. Your job is not good enough again. Your house is not good enough. Your spouse is not good enough. Your marriage is not good enough. Your friends are not good enough. Your income is not good enough. Your life is not good enough. Nothing is good enough. You are always critical. You can never just sit down and savor the moment. You can never just sit down and enjoy what is in front of you. There's always something wrong because you're comparing yourself to someone else. Therefore, envy poisons us psychologically and spiritually. For example, envy poisons your ability to appreciate your own body. We live in a culture that almost makes us envy the beautiful. Why would I say that? Is that statement too strong? Have I crossed over the line? What is your opinion on what I've said about our body and any other area we've covered? I personally see it as a marketing strategy. Why would I say that? Agree or disagree? What are your thoughts? Have I crossed the line?
That statement could be taken two different ways. The market certainly uses it as a marketing strategy, but also if I were to see a beautiful, say, woman applying for a job, I could say her beauty is a marketing strategy to get the job. Kind of, to me, two different things.
Mm-hmm. Do you think people envy other people's bodies and other people's lives and other people's, the way they look?
This is a strong subject for me because I've always hated my body. No matter what I've looked like, it's just never good enough. And I think you haven't crossed the line. I think it's, our bodies are something that we view, everyone outside can see that. They can't see our soul. They can see our body and what we look like. And I always have wanted to look my best, and I've never left my house without makeup on. I just feel like it's a part of me and I need to look a certain way. And there's a lot of people that don't agree with that. It's definitely a marketing strategy. There's always new products to make you look better, make you, just feel better. Weight has always been a big issue for me, but I don't know that I really envy people. This is making me think a lot of, do I envy people that look a certain way? I don't know. It's just very thought-provoking for me.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Very insightful. Anyone else?
I've always been envious of my two younger sisters. They were taller and thinner than I was, and they had accomplished things that I hadn't. And as time goes on and I get older, I have come to realize, because of things that have happened, that of the three of us, there were actually four, but my youngest sister died at age 30. Anyway, of the three of us, I'm the one that's envied now by them. And how this all happened is quite a long story, but the major thing has been, I believe, that my perception of the world and the way I live my life has become the thing that has mattered the most. Neither one of them are Christians, and I am. And I've learned over the years not to hide that. I used to sort of hide that because we'd get into arguments, which I didn't want to get into. But now I don't. And they have both remarked in one way or another that they wish they had the perspective that I have on things, and kind of talking around my faith, kind of saying things that aren't exactly about that, but they actually are about that. And so it has just, being older and living through life where I have envied them, I've come to the point where it's actually easier to be older than you'd think it would be, because everything not great happens when you get older. Your body even gets worse, and your health doesn't stay very well either. But it's a whole different perspective when you're older, when you look back on things and how they happened, and the things I have envied in my life matter so little anymore.
Yeah, thank you. Marketing bombards us with beauty so often that when we look in a mirror, we can't enjoy what we see at all. If we just buy the products, books, diet programs, cosmetics, etc., we'll look like the models we see as beautiful. I know many people who literally hate the way they look. There's an entire class of young people who hate the way they look. When these Proverbs and Psalms, with these Proverbs and Psalms we have been reading imply is that the envy has poisoned us if we look at the beautiful and resent them or envy them because we do not have what they have and likely never will. It's hard to face reality when it comes to our bodies. I worked as a teacher for UW-Madison, and I can tell you that it is fraught with jealousy. So is the corporate world. So are competitive businesses and companies. So is politics. And too often, so is the church. Adam and Eve got paradise, and it wasn't good enough. They had to eat of the tree to try to become as wise as God. They weren't satisfied. If you understand what you envy, you'll know who you are. All human beings are to build our identity on God and make God the source of our identity. Instead of building our identity on God, we build our identity on things. Any of you old enough to remember the movie Rocky? Yo, Adrian. And when he's talking, he's telling Adrian, if I can just go the distance, I won't be a bum. His whole identity was wrapped up in the fact that he was a boxer. And if he could just go the distance, he would prove that his identity was okay. He was worth something. And it just seems like we get so distorted all the time. If you want to understand what you look to instead of God for your identity, what you look to for your justification, for your existence, figure out your envies. Here's another test. If you see others doing better than you in an area you are good at or talented in, and you admire them without envy or jealousy or feeling like you should be doing as well or better, you likely have envy under control. And it's hard sometimes for us to really grab onto this, but Mozart. Anybody see the movie Mozart? That's quite a while ago. Salieri was jealous of Mozart. Do you remember that? And Salieri was a brilliant musician, and Mozart was over the top. And Salieri was jealous because he would work harder than Mozart. And he would want and desire to be better than what he was. He had this aspiration of who he should be in his mind, and he wasn't getting it. And he was so jealous of Mozart. I mean, it's so ironic. And the problem was, there was a root of good in what he had because he loved music. He just couldn't handle the fact that he could never get to the point where he was good enough with what he had in his own mind. J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, and C.S. Lewis in 1937, they both decided, there aren't any really good books out there, any good fiction books for Christians to read, especially young people. So let's write some. C.S. Lewis took off like a rocket, writing Screwtape Letters, writing Tales of Narnia, writing the Space Trilogy. I mean, he just wrote 30, 40 books, and they were all outstanding, and he just kept rolling them out. Tolkien was jealous because he would write what became Lord of the Rings. What was the original one, Larry? Can't remember.
The Fellowship of the Ring?
Fellowship of the Ring, is that the first one?
That's the one, first one.
Okay. The Hobbit.
Oh, you mean outside the trilogy?
His very first one.
Okay.
He would write the same chapter, rewrite it 10 times or more, and he was never satisfied with it. He was never satisfied. It wasn't good enough. And C.S. Lewis was cranking out all these books, and he could never get past first base. He was frustrated. So years later, in 1941, C.S. Lewis had already written probably 20 books, and Tolkien was still struggling with his first few chapters of The Hobbit. And he was jealous of C.S. Lewis, and a Christian. He's a Christian. And one night he had a dream. And he was recalling the dream the next day, and he had writer's block, and it was a dream of a person named Nigel. I don't know why he thought in his dream it should be a person named Nigel. It was a person named Nigel, and Nigel died before he could paint this beautiful tree. He started painting the tree, and he could never finish painting the tree in his lifetime, and he died. And he's on a train to paradise, and all of a sudden he spots the tree that he wanted to paint. And he says, "Stop the train." So they stop the train. This is in a dream. He stopped the train. He gets out and he looks at the tree, and it's exactly what he wanted to paint. And when Tolkien woke up the next day, he He determined that's the answer. That's the answer. You know what? When I die, my book will be perfect. When I die, it will be all about the Lord. It will be something that can glorify God. I will be on a new heaven and a new earth. And his writer's block went away. He was no longer envious of C.S. Lewis, and whoosh, you know what happened. All these other wonderful books appeared. Because in his envy, in his jealousy, he finally recognized that the ultimate end is not about who we compare ourselves to here, how we look, what we have, what we do, how much we have. It's not about that. This is just a little tiny blip on the screen. My goodness, I digressed. I'll never get through these slides. We have to examine ourselves and ask what it is. What if we accomplish, we will know our life is justified. If we could just get it, we'll have lived a fulfilled life, and our identity is proven. And if we don't accomplish it, we'll resent and envy those who do. That's living outside of God being our identity. If you know God loves you, and your relationship with God is where you find your identity, then envy's under control, and we can live a life of joy and be content in our circumstances. You know, as I reflect on now coming up against the timeline of my last class next week, I want to try and summarize some of the things that I think have been the most important for us to understand. And we've covered a lot of territory. So now what I want you to do is I want you to dig into the archives of your mind and think if there's anything over the past semester that has brought to light something in your life or some thoughts that you have had. It just seems like I teach in here, and then I wonder if it's just going straight through or if anything at all happens to land in between. And I'm giving you a fair warning. I really want your input next week, if you have any, on what you have learned. Because the whole purpose of what we're doing here is to apply what we've learned to our lives. It's not just to learn more about who God is even, or what we can know about the Scripture. It's who God is in relation to how God changes our life and what we know about the Scripture in terms of how we apply it to our life. Because that's where the foundation of spiritual growth occurs. So, fair warning, I'll try not to digress too much next week. I'll stick right to the subject because it will really bother me if I don't finish my slides, so I won't have too many. All right, see you next week. Thank you.